Welcome back to my channel. Today I am basically just gonna go over how I have been rehabbing my shoulder per se and kind of like how I injured it. Quite a fun story. Literally, this is how it went down. The other day I was laying on my bed like so, and somebody decided to come into my hallway and scare me, and I went like this to like jerk myself up. But I had been laying like this for like honestly 20 minutes, and all I could hear was and I was like, oh. Then my shoulder was like, it felt like I'd been punched in the arm. It was so sore, hurt really bad, very uncomfortable, and I couldn't raise it past like here. That was the day it happened, and the day after that I couldn't really raise it past like here. Like I could do this, but once I fully extended and locked out and shrugged, I had a lot of pain in kind of like the posterior part of my shoulder. So the next day exactly, actually, went to the chiropractor, and he did a lot of work on my scapula. And if you guys don't know, your scapula just kind of sits on your back right about in this region, and it is just kind of like a flat-ish bone, and it attaches via your, I want to say it's your levator scapula. There's a muscle that attaches, and it allows your scapula to raise and elevate in this position. And you can also, if you were to kind of like push your push your shoulder forward, you can wing out your scapula, which is bad. You never ever want that. You always want your scapula to lay flat and either elevate or depress, but you don't even really want it to depress. You want them to stay neutral, in line, lay flat on your back. I knew I had screwed up my scapula because it hurt, and I couldn't lay flat against a wall or a bench when I would go to bench. It wasn't flat, I was uneven, so I could tell, and my chiropractor knows that I'm constantly dealing with kind of weird shoulder pains because I sleep horrendously. I sleep on my side, and I sleep really curled up, so you know, and I only sleep on one side. I don't really alternate, so I know that causes shoulder pain. Right after it happened, visited the chiropractor. He worked on my scapula, and the next day I was like, all right, I have, you know, a lot less pain. I was still super sore, and it still wasn't very comfortable, but the movement I did that changed the game for me was overhead pressing. And this is, I've made a video on this before, and I will continue to do it probably till the day I die, because people just don't seem to believe that this is like the movement that reigns king. I overhead press because, number one, it utilizes all muscles in the shoulder. And a lot of people are like, well, I need to hit my rear delts. So they'll come into the gym and do a lot of different like external rotators and stuff, which is fine. But at the end of the day, doing something like that to rehab your shoulder isn't really going to be as effective as doing a movement like an overhead press. Number one, because you overhead press every single day, whether you recognize it or not. You're always reaching up to grab something, you just overhead pressed. Like, I don't think people realize how functional an overhead press is. Try going a day without overhead pressing. Please let me know how it goes. Number two, you can actually work on progressively overloading the overhead press or the press. You can't really progressively overload doing external rotations. You can't. What I mean by progressive overload is essentially constantly striving to increase the load or the weight. That is just progressively overloading the weight, and you can't do that with a movement like this or this, and you wouldn't want to, just because that's not safe. You're, you know, reaching for a very tiny muscle versus working the whole shoulder in its entirety. And for the third reason, basically, is why not just work the whole shoulder? Like, if you can overload, you know, your rear delts and all of the little nitty gritty back there and your stabilizers in your shoulder, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? If those are what your problem is, why wouldn't you want to strengthen them? You know, so like, I personally didn't rehab with any of, you know, external rotation. I literally just grabbed a barbell and I started overhead pressing. I kept the bar high up on my chest, and I kept my arms close in so that my elbow and my wrist are straight, and I pressed over my head. And at the top, I made sure to almost do a little bit of a shrug so that My shoulder is fully engaged, and my scapula is laying flat, and it is tight, it is raised, and then I bring the bar back down. My God, I swear nobody ever hits me up, and then when I pull out the camera to film, people try and talk to me. I'm getting heated. So I basically just started overhead pressing for sets of 5, and I worked up to about 75 pounds, completely pain-free, and I did 75 for 5 reps of 5 sets, 75 pounds. And after that, I felt good. I did a little bit of seated shoulder press too, just because I continued to feel good. But after that, I was like, all right, leaving the gym, not going to push it with any side laterals or front raises or anything, because that just puts my shoulder at risk whenever I'm just trying to get it to move one way properly, utilize all my muscles, versus kind of getting a little bit too fancy where I could, you know, my shoulder's not moving properly. So it's a lot harder to get your shoulder to move properly in these ranges of motion. And those ranges of motion still are kind of uncomfortable for me right now. So the only thing that doesn't hurt is pressing. And that really is the only thing that shouldn't hurt. A lot of people will get discomfort, but that's because they don't ever press and their shoulders are screwed up. So I suggest you start pressing, and you start with the barbell, and I promise you, you will build bulletproof shoulders from all angles. I promise you. So yeah, I literally just started overhead pressing, and then 3 days later I went in, and my shoulder, it still feels sore, it still feels a little wonky. I'm gonna have to see my chiropractor again, but I went in and I overhead pressed again, and I literally PR'd. I hit 90 pounds for 3 sets of 3, which is a really good PR. And considering the fact that I did just recently have like a shoulder injury and I PR'd, that's a big deal. But regardless of that, that's just because I'm young and I'm recovering fast as well. But I don't go in the gym and waste my time with doing a bunch of other external rotators and all these other crazy things, because in reality too, you don't really move like this. You don't, in the real world, move in such an isolated manner per se. So that's why at the end of the day, just overhead pressing is the safest thing. And if you think otherwise, feel free to leave your comment below and let me know why. But I will most likely come back with a comment as to saying why I believe it's the best movement. And I'm just saying best movement for shoulder health. Honestly, I think it's been the best movement for building my shoulders, just because I've been able to work and overload it so much. Obviously, there are movements that will target more shoulders, but personally, I've noticed the best delt development from being consistent with my overhead presses. And honestly, I really don't ever get shoulder injuries. This was just something because, like I said, I was laying really weird, and the way I moved, just, it was bad. But other than that, like, overhead pressing has made my shoulders so much stronger overall, and just, I don't have shoulder pain unless it's from like this stupid injury. But other than that, I don't think, I know everybody needs to be overhead pressing. So I hope this video helped. Please overhead press. Please, 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 please. Do it for me, do it for you, do it for your shoulders. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you as always for watching. That's all. Bye.